Hey, welcome into the Husker247 HoopsCast. I'm Mike Schaefer, joined by Brian Christopherson. Schedule got off a little bit this week, so now we have 3 games to cover, unfortunately, for Nebraska. 2 of them are losses. The most recent one, pretty ugly in Pennsylvania, as the Huskers fall by 17 points to Penn State on Wednesday night. BC, we'll just go ahead and start there. I mean, we can get into the big Northwestern comeback later in the pod and the kind of aggravating loss to Maryland at home. But that game against Penn State, just to get this conversation rolling, does it give you a lot of concern moving forward? Are you willing to kind of just sort of brush it off as second game on a road trip for a team that's played a lot of basketball lately? What's your overarching takeaway from Nebraska's loss to Penn State and kind of just coming out and playing as poorly as they did and then never really able to turn the tide?
I think you can have both the opinion that the performance against yesterday was completely disappointing to have a clunker like that with the stakes as they are, and also have the same opinion that had you told me at the beginning of the weekend they were going to win one of the two on the road trip, I probably would have bet that's what would happen and would have taken those results and moved forward. And so that's kind of where I sit this morning. I'm not like overly panicked by the 89-72 loss, in which they were down double digits for 33 minutes or the
Yeah.
last 33 minutes of the game. It was 2-2, and then it was 14-2. The last time it was within single digits was 17-8 with like 13 minutes left. So it was a ridiculously bad performance. And what kind of made it tough too was it wasn't like, and maybe this is what made it tougher on Nebraska, actually. It was like they were playing in a library. I mean, there was nobody there. The people who were there weren't even that into it. And, Penn State, obviously, despite the lack of crowd, they're trying to play their way into the top 15, even be in the Big Ten tournament. So they've been a team that has played some others close. They've played Michigan and Michigan State within 5. They've beaten Purdue. So I was a little worried about that game going in, Schaefer. I'm not going to lie. But I didn't expect Nebraska to just get thumped and not have any pushback at all.
Yeah, it felt like a perfect storm of nothing was going to go well. You lose Andrew Morgan in the first 90 seconds of the game. Bryce Williams has 3 fouls in the first half. You're not able to make shots. You have 5 straight turnovers at one point. Offensively, it just was a bad performance. And I don't know that it's indicative of much. And yeah, they played it in front of felt like 12 people who were at that game on Wednesday night. And that was a Penn State team that they're more athletic than Nebraska. They're a high pressure defense. This is a Nebraska team that I think has really weak ball handling skills and struggles
Yeah.
when teams get after them. And if you're not going to get officiated in a certain way, and I don't think the officials are a problem, so I don't want to throw that out there, but Nebraska relies on kind of officiating to get them to the free throw line and also to keep them off of their guards. And Penn State hounded Nebraska and forced those turnovers early, and then we're able to convert their layups into and ones in some situations. And Nebraska just really had no answer for it. There was a little bit of a spark early in the second half where it felt like with about 3.5 minutes into the second half, Nebraska had brought it to a 16-point game. Sam Hoiberg's lining up a three-pointer. He misses it. They come down, hit a 3. Nebraska has a failed possession. They come down, get a 2, and another failed possession. They come down, get a 3. There's like an 8-point avalanche. Nebraska's back down by 24 in the second half, and that was kind of when I felt like the game was completely over. And so not a good performance. I don't want to make too much of it. The one thing that does stand out is they had 2 absolute clunkers in a row, but they were able to escape Northwestern with a win. I felt like a split would be a good result in this road trip. And they've got 2 big home games coming back in Lincoln, a little bit of time to prepare for Michigan, and then some more time to prepare for Minnesota. A split would be huge there too. Winning 2 would be almost cementing your ticket to the NCAA tournament, I think. So just a big week ahead for Nebraska with a quiet weekend, I guess, if you will. But I don't want to like overdo it with this Penn State game. Like they played poorly, they lost. You gave up 60% shooting, and Penn State for as bad as they have played, for losing 11 of 12 games, they have some athletes and they can definitely play some basketball. In the Big Ten, there are no easy nights. Nebraska and Penn State proved that again.
Yeah. You mentioned Penn State's pressure. Nebraska had 7 possessions where they turned it over 6 times in a row there early. And it was almost 7 in a row. The one where they didn't, that was the possession where it was an awful set. And it ended up with Juwan Gary realizing he just had to throw one up with like half a second on the shot clock. So basically 7 vacant possessions in a row, which sort of produced the sort of game we were going to have the whole night. And so that was what was disappointing to me is some of it was Penn State's pressure, but Nebraska also like dribbled into it. They've at Northwestern, they did this too. Like there was a play where Bryce picked up his dribble, and then it ended up as a turnover against Northwestern on Sunday. Stuff like that they've done where they've kind of produced their own unforced errors in a way, and give Penn State some of the credit for that. But you're right, a split was fortunate. Fred Hoiberg said as much in the post game. He said we played 15 good minutes on this road trip, and so I guess that's how they when you get on the plane heading for home, that's the way you look at it. You're really kind of disgusted, I think, with yourself with how you performed over the duration of this visit, and yet you say, okay, we won one. Let's figure this out now. Let's hopefully get Burke back. I think we've seen that's a big deal. If for no other reason, I think he's one of their best defenders. He blocks out, he helps them get boards and stuff like that. But he also gives them more cushion for foul trouble possibilities. And you saw that last night when Andrew Morgan, who has been foul trouble prone in his career, gets 2 right off the bat. Nebraska's just in a world of hurt. I knew they were in trouble in that game right then and there, 93 seconds in because of that. And you saw Morgan go 8 for 8 then. I mean, he would have been a tough matchup for him. But Penn State's not stupid. They attacked him. They knew let's get him some fouls. And Andrews had a propensity for that. So that was a big part of it. And I'm not saying that would have flipped everything, but matchups like that I think they would have changed the direction of the first half somewhat.
Yeah, and we've mentioned that Penn State. We mentioned Northwestern game a little bit. Nebraska came back from, I believe, 20 was the high point.
Yep.
Their deficit in that one. And I think the thing that I find frustrating, Brian, is that they're just starting these games in such huge holes. You're not giving yourself any favor. And so you can't keep coming back from double digits in all of these games. And so some of it is, can Nebraska get home, get a little bit of rest, and then get off to a decent start against Michigan and Minnesota? I mean, Michigan is a team that if you spot them a 14-2 lead the way you did against Penn State, you're done. You're not going to come back against Michigan like you did against Northwestern. I mean, so they're going to have to play a lot better basketball. I think being at home will help. Hopefully, if they're at full strength, that will help. But more than anything, they have to find a way to start these games a little bit better. I mean, both the game against Northwestern and Penn State, you just cannot put yourself in these huge first half holes. And then on top of it, I mean, defensively, they played terrible against Penn State. You cannot let a team shoot 67% in a half. You can't let Penn State score 50 points in the first half. And it was bad rotation. It was leaving guys wide open. They couldn't defend in the paint. I mean, they got absolutely their lunch eaten in the paint. And the same thing kind of happened against Northwestern too, where Ty Berry drilled a bunch of threes and Nick Martinelli was going to work inside. And they were able to finally stop the Tide in the second half and then built their own and then finally made it a basketball game and pulled through because they have Bryce Williams and Braxton Mia played the best game of his season, and that all worked in their favor. But I think the biggest takeaway I have from this, if anything, is they got to figure out whatever is happening at the beginning of these games that they can not put themselves in such giant holes right off the bat. It's one thing, I guess, if you fall behind by 10 in the run of play 15 minutes into a game. It's another thing if you're down by 12 points before the first media timeout. Like, that's just you can't have that happen. That has to be the biggest thing to me that needs to be fixed.
Yeah, and I know they do certain things in practice that try to play into what you're talking about, where it's like, okay, there's typically 7 possessions in a media segment. You got to hold them to less than 7 points before you're stop running lines and move on with the practice. And so there's various things like that they do. But you're right. It hasn't been stable enough at the beginning. And it has really been true. You can tell a lot about Nebraska with sometimes, especially at home, like how they come out in the first 5 minutes that it'll register with you right away what kind of Husker team you're going to get that night, like, so that's going to be the key on Monday night. On the Berke situation, Hoiberg said after the game in the legit post game room, we have the video on our site, that it would be till Sunday where he would probably be doing live work. He was on the court though, and so he's been progressing well, but there's not going to be a big runway for him to play if he does play in this game. And so that would be a very difficult, or will be a very difficult challenge for him, with obviously the bigs and the talent that Michigan has with Wolf and those guys. If he jumps right into the mix, so there should be some understanding about the level of difficulty that'll be even if he does pop back in.
Was there any takeaways that you had were there any positives to take out of the Penn State game?
I get no, not a lot. I mean, I think Connor Essegian's last game and a half, the fact that he was scoring the ball, and his last half against Northwestern in particular, he had the 8 points, but he also had like those 4 rebounds in a row. And they ended up holding Northwestern to less than a point possession. It was one of their better defensive performances by the end of the game, in a strange game where Northwestern shot at 27 more times, had a 23-5 offensive boards edge and all that stuff. But then Nebraska had some stats that kind of evened it out, getting the line in that. But I thought Essegian was key in that win on Sunday. And then he did score 20 last night, to the question you're actually asking, which I thought, maybe that helped. Maybe it's a boost. Maybe this is something where he's in a rhythm now and he's scoring 12 to 15, and that's what they're going to need, I think, the rest of the way. He's got to be that guy for him. And I think his example of getting those rebounds against Northwestern, which is why I brought it up, is what everybody's got to have. Like, it's got to be 5 guys figuring out how to get that ball when it goes up and closing out defensive possessions. And that's what he did really well at the end of the Northwestern game. So hopefully that model can be followed going forward.
I don't know that I have a lot more to kind of add on that. It's just sort of an ugly road trip. Here's what I would say. If you're sitting here today and you're concerned about the direction of Nebraska's program with the NCAA tournament, like within arm's reach, if you were to have gone back and you look at it, and going into the month of February, you have 2 road trips that feature back-to-back road games. And Nebraska comes out of it at 3-4. It was like they've won 3 out of the 4. So not 3-4. They 3-1 out of those 4 games. You would have taken that before the season. You would have taken that before February. The reason that it hurts is that it's the last place team in the Big Ten, and you didn't really give yourself a chance to win the game. But overall, to win 3 of the 4 games this month on the road, I think is a pretty strong overall performance for Nebraska. I don't want to get into the habit of overreacting because they had a really bad game and, now they're destined to the NIT and they're going to play on the first night of the Big Ten tournament and whatever. This team is more than capable of turning it around, playing Michigan really tough, winning against Michigan on Monday, playing a Minnesota game that's not going to be a gimme at home on Saturday. Like, this is a team that can turn this around. I just don't want to fall in the trap of overreacting too much because they had a particularly ugly 2-game stretch that they still ended up splitting.
You got to beat Minnesota and Iowa. Yep. And then you've got 2 games that are obvious quad ones where if you really want to cement it and not have that nervousness there, you go take one of those 2. But even if they win the 2 I talk about, I think they still might have the standing to get in. They're 6-8 in quad one still. They're 52 in the net as we're doing this. 6, I don't know if the numbers change, but there were only like 18 teams that had 6 or more quad one wins as of the other day. And so, I think the resume at this point is pretty solid for them. But that's the way they have to look at it too. Now that they're back in Lincoln, it's like, okay, that was not acceptable what happened last night. We're a better basketball team than that, but it's all in front of us. And, I do think some people too, we treated it occasionally, it gets treated a little too much like football when there's loss.
Yep.
Like the basketball seasons are going to have these like ebbs and flows, and they're going to have some absolute like, what was that, games for every team has them. And I thought it was a really ugly performance. I also am always worried about any team they play on the road, no matter what their standing in the league is.
Right.
I'm not one of those people who's like, oh, they're last place, they suck. I look at Penn State's resume, what I see when I looked at the 7 losses is I see, 6-point loss here. They lost by 4 to Michigan. At Michigan, they lost by like 5 at Michigan State. They beat Purdue at one point. I'm like, that's going to be a tough game if Penn State's interested in it. And so I'm not trying to make excuses for him, but I wasn't going into yesterday just like, that's a gimme. I didn't think it was a 2-foot putt, but you got to play well enough to at least make it a 5-foot putt, and Nebraska didn't.
Yeah, I don't think it's making excuses to say they got their ass kicked and that they have the ability to turn around and play better basketball against Michigan and Minnesota this next week. Like I don't think the team that showed up in Northwestern or at Penn State is emblematic of who Nebraska basketball is in 24-25. That being said, they get the opportunity to go prove that against Michigan on Monday night. It's a huge opportunity in front of them. And I think they're going to play well. And I think it's going to be a good game. And I'm excited for it. And this is what you want, right? Like we want Nebraska basketball to be playing in critical games in the month of February. And this is where they are right now with the opportunity to kind of punch their ticket for a great season. And I don't know that there's a whole lot more that you can ask for at this point in time. And so we'll see kind of where Burke's at health-wise going into that. The next podcast will likely go up the Tuesday after that game. And we're going to have a lot of conversation with Nebraska having just 3 games left following that Michigan game and where everything's at. But right now, 17-10, everything right in front of you. I still feel pretty good about where this season is and where the season's going to go.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, if nothing else. Like you're right. Like they went 3-1 on that road trip. Before that, people weren't even. They're kind of casting it to the side.
Remember, you got to win 2 road games and then mostly hold serve at home, and so they've largely done what was asked of them. And the other thing is tough conference, and that again, I don't think that's an excuse either. Minnesota came back by double digits and beat UCLA the other night. Like that Minnesota game, it's going to be hard on Saturday.
It will be
on the first, and
so will Iowa. So will Iowa. I mean,
there are no easy games. There really aren't.
Yeah, you're right. Let's see what happens Monday. I think hopefully people kind of they have some time to recuperate from this one, and by Monday night, kind of a classic Big Monday. That should have an old school feel to Husker fans in a way. Nebraska faithful should go to that and be jacked up because it's sort of the game of the season at PBA, I think, really.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, so people should be pretty fired up for it.
Absolutely. You know what else people should be fired up for? Guess a random Husker hooper.
Yeah.
Let's get BT's so fired up he's trying to fight through coughs right now because he knows he's going to nail this on just one clue.
Let me drink some tea and honey. All right.
Yeah. I will. I'm going to give you one clue. It's going to be 1.5 clues because I'm going to say this is a player that you have covered. And then I'm going to say this player scored 41 points in a conference game.
What, Eric Piakowski or what?
Well, were you covering Eric Piakowski for the
I was covering
Pepperwood paper?
Yeah, I kind of was covering him actually because I was a little dork who would like write up stuff and no.
It's good to know that I wasn't alone doing that as a young child.
Eric Piakowski had 45 one time, I think, against Oklahoma. I know it's not Piakowski. Okay, 41, and I covered him. Should be easy. Alex March
had 41 against Kansas State, but it's not Alex March.
How many did he have against Missouri that one time? Remember that?
It was 41. He could have had a 50-point game in that game.
Man, that was a game.
No, not Missouri. I was thinking Kansas State. I'd have to go back and look at the Missouri one.
Okay. I thought he had one against Missouri. It was like overtime or something. But that was a great game. So it's not
other stats for this player. He spent one season at Nebraska.
I know it's an easy answer. It's I know. I can't. I know who it is. I can't think of his name.
Like, can you tell us his name?
Yeah, say his name.
Do you want me to keep giving you clues?
No, just talk about him. I can't think of his name.
We're talking about a player that quit the team essentially on March 1st.
I cannot think of his name.
2021 year. Teddy Allen, local player.
I had it. Did you hear that? Did you hear me?
You did say it.
I came to you right when you were going to say it. I couldn't think of his name.
41 points against Penn State on February 23rd, 2021. He averaged 16.5 points a game, 4.7 rebounds, left the team on March 1st, played 22 games total, had 20 points or more 8 times on the season.
I didn't actually cover him, though.
You didn't cover him?
No, Bruns was doing more of it that year, and they were not good. And I'll be honest, I wasn't paying a lot of attention to him that year. I knew.
Well, now I feel bad. I thought you were covering the team in 2021.
No. That's all right. I knew who it was though. I just couldn't think. It was one of those name blanks. But yeah, Teddy Allen he was one of those, like, man, he could go into a gym, like just an open gym, and just dominate. That'd be like, he'll be doing that. He could do that as long as he wanted.
Yeah, he had 23 points against number 17 Michigan State that year, 21 points against number 19 Michigan, 26 points against number 8 Creighton. Also did it against South Dakota, North Dakota, put up 25 against Maryland. Just a very good scorer. I don't know that he would be marked as a beloved teammate. We'll put it that way. I don't think there was any tears shed when he left the team in 2021. So, and he went on to play at New Mexico State for his final year, I believe, and they upset Kentucky in the NCAA tournament. Yeah. I think he was on that team. I think that's his post-Nebraska career was an NCAA tournament appearance with New Mexico State where they knocked off Kentucky and John Calipari. So
he had a colorful college career. He lived life.
These were the coaches that he played for in his career. Played for Bob Huggins at West Virginia. He played for Fred Hoiberg, obviously. I think he transferred from West Virginia to Nebraska. I don't think there was any other spot in between there. No, he was at Western Nebraska Community College. That's where he was in between West Virginia and Nebraska. And then was Reggie Theus his coach at New Mexico State? Is that right?
Might have been.
He's been a kind of a long-time college basketball coach. Plus, I think he was an actor at one point in his life.
New Mexico State's kind of a little college basketball hotbed, I think. They get pretty fired up about it. New Mexico does. The Lobos, I know. Maybe New Mexico State, too. I don't know.
Yeah, for some reason, I cannot find where he was the New Mexico State. This is in 2005. So he was there well before Teddy Allen would have been there. I don't know who New Mexico. I thought it was a Chris Jan. They had a coach who got hired immediately after that win against Kentucky, and so maybe it was Chris Jan.
Their head coach right now is Jason Houghton, and I
think it was Chris Jans, who's now at Mississippi State.
There you go,
where he's doing quite well.
Giving the people what they want.
Yeah, they wanted Chris Jans stuff.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we appreciate the people joining us on this podcast where we discussed Nebraska's 1-2 efforts against Maryland, which we didn't really talk about that game at all. So that was, I thought, kind of a frustrating loss. Nebraska, I thought, played well. Maryland just hit a bunch of key shots and just it was a night where they were just a little bit better. And Maryland's a good team. Like I think that would have been a nice win for Nebraska had they been.
Oh, it would have been an amazing win when you look back on it, because Bryce had the flu, which I just think he somehow I caught whatever was going on through that. Not through Bryce. I'm not blaming Bryce. He didn't come into the post game room.
BC local scribe blames basketball player for sickness.
But as I was going through the last couple of days, I was like, man, that's pretty awesome that Bryce Williams played 39 minutes and scored 20-some points against Maryland. Like, that's a nice accomplishment.
Also sick that day, Connor Sejan. Don't look at the stat line.
Yeah, he had the kind of game any of us would have if we were feeling like that.
So, all right. Well, we will be back next week to dissect the Nebraska-Michigan contest and set you up for Nebraska-Minnesota. We'll see what kind of week it is. We'll see what the vibes are in Lincoln. I think it should be a fun crowd at PBA on Monday. And they're trying to stripe out, Brian. How do you feel about that? Will you try to wear a color that fits what they want? I don't know if you're going to be red or white.
I usually go with like a neutral, black or blue, except unless they're playing Creighton. I don't want people to say, "Oh, I see, I knew it," So I never wear blue for that one. But
that's funny.
I'll probably be in a black, maybe a vest.
No, it's not the Minnesota. It's the Minnesota game. I think the Saturday game where they're trying to do the stripe out, not the Michigan game. So,
now people are going to be all messed up.
Yeah, well, whatever. They can figure it out. Find it somewhere on your social platforms. It's not my job to tell you what to wear. So that's not what we do here. We're not the fashion police on the Husker 24/7 HoopsCast. All right, for Brian Christopherson, I'm Mike Schaefer. I'm going to end this before I get into any more trouble. We'll catch you next week with another Husker 24/7 HoopsCast.